everyone, Karen the Spinster here. Thanks for joining me today. Welcome to my channel. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate all of you and your support. It's one of those days when, you know how sometimes you're a little bit glum or blue for no reason at all? And I'm having one of those days, and I'm grateful that I could sit down and do some exploring with all of you. So thank you very much. I also will note this may end up being a little short video. I have racked out my right wrist somehow doing lots of work in my house and yard, and I have offended my right wrist in some way. And it's giving me a lot of trouble today. So basically my right side is just a hot mess right now between my poor smashed finger and my wrist, and yeah. Anyway, not complaining, just explaining. Last week we did some X's, which are the kisses part of the XO, not the hugs. Yikes, some days. See, this is why I need you all here to keep me on track with these things. And these were the two favorite, I guess I would say. There were some folks who liked this one too. I think most of you didn't hate this one, but we all kind of agree it needs something more. So I have an idea for that. We'll see how it goes. And then I have a couple of ideas to try out, and who knows? Story of our lives, right? Sometimes we are successful at creating fabulous, and sometimes we're a little off the mark. So let's start with, now I will do this one last, I think. Let's start with, I have these 3 squares. Let's start with this one. I'm not quite sure what fabric I'm going to use with this because it's not a bright, and you know I do a lot of brights. Oh, I could do black and white stripes or black and white print or something, maybe. All right, now, one of the things that is kind of an obvious one, I guess, is to cut curves instead of straight lines. So I should decide what I want to use here, because then I can cut the curve the same. So I will dive into my stash, see what I can find. I did not like the black and white, or just plain black, or just plain white. It just isn't right for this. So I pulled this out. It may be from the same collection. I think it is, actually. But it does the orange that's in here and kind of the blue. So we'll give this a try, and I'm going to quit leaning against the table that the camera holder is attached to. So let's do a curve. And as always with curves, this is not going to be perfect putting it back together because we are not. I'm going to try to, sorry about that camera bump. Try to make it an interesting curve that you'll actually be able to see, but gentle enough that it's not going to be a pain to try to stitch. So pay attention, Karen, it is this one you want. And I'm just going to make a little mark on here for where I'm starting to sew this curve. And just as a review, I know I've said this 1,000 times, plug your ears if you've heard it too many times. I'm going to use needle down position, go slowly, and I will have this on top. Now there are 2 ways I can do this since this is an S curve. I can just, once I get to this, I like to have the convex on top. Did I say concave? Probably. I like the convex on top is my preferred. So I can go halfway and stop and lock it, and then come back and come into it from the other direction, being careful that I really meet it here. Or I can just continue and move this over, just do the concave as I would the convex. Depends on what you're comfortable with. But I'm always, when I am bringing this over, I'm not pulling it over, I'm not tugging on it, I'm making sure that my needle is 1/4 inch from the edge at the place where the needle is, not the front of my presser foot. And I'm just lifting this and bringing it over. I'm not tugging on it because this is, of course, seriously biased. All right. End of common lecture. All right, I will sew this and then we'll come back and cut this other piece. I think that'll be kind of fun. We'll see. All right, now I have a couple of choices here. I can cut this at the same curve so that I have roughly the same width going across there, as if I'd put a bias strip in. Or I can adjust the curve and change it, which I think I'll do because of this curve. This regular dot is going to be out of whack anyway, so why not just do it up proud? And I think that'll be more interesting anyway. So I have to remember I've got seam allowance coming in here yet. So depending on how wide I want that strip to be. And of course, this square is going to end up much smaller because I'm going to trim it because we don't have seam allowances built in here. So I think I'll do that. And keeping my fingers well away. If this frightens you, you can use a protective glove, which I have in the drawer, but here I am not using it. Okay, so that's got a little bit of a spread as it comes up here. So I want to make sure that I should have marked this before I pulled it away, but all right, now I'm going to mark where I want this to be. And of course, you can always pin these curves if you're not comfortable just doing them without pins. I might pin if I were doing a regular curve where we had the seam allowances built in, where it should start and end in the proper place. But because that's never going to happen, because we don't have the seam allowances built in. So I'm even less inclined to pin this, and with needle down, I just stop every few stitches if I need to and adjust things, adjust this over a little bit, and it goes just fine. I quite like this. I guess I'm in a curvy kind of mood today. We need to do the other side of the X, of course. So I went down to my stash, and this is another one from the collection. I tried to match the colors as best I can, and my issue is that these are more muted colors than I typically use. So I pulled another one from the collection, and for a while I thought I liked that. When I was downstairs in not natural light, I thought I might like that. I think I don't. I also have this, I don't know, light rusty kind of orange, which is a little brighter than this color in here and not quite the same as that orange, but I think it will be fine. And having the solid will, I think, sort of tie it together and not make the eye go too wild. I know, hard to believe. So I will then now cut a piece, a curve. Let me press this first, but I'll cut a curve going diagonally the other way, and then we shall see how that goes. Because now we have to decide how we want to cut this particular curve. Pressing didn't do me a lot of good there, did it? So I can save some fabric. I'll do it this way. And do I want just a single C curve? Do I want an S curve? I'm going to try an S curve. We'll see how it goes. I'm going to be saying that a lot today, I have a feeling. we'll just see how it all goes. This is the problem when you stack fabrics on top of each other, of course. It's going to do that. All right, so this one, I could sew this side to this curve, but of course I don't have very much up here, so I am going to sew to this side of the curve first and give myself plenty of room here. Some of you will be gasping at the waste of fabric, but you know I also use these extra pieces, right? Sorry about that. In my new studio, in my dream studio, I'm going to have a camera that's mounted on the ceiling and I can work without bumping into the camera stand. All right, so now I am going to sew this curve and then I'll come back and sew the other side of it. It's going to be kind of interesting. It's a free-flowing free X. All right, same routine, mark it, needle down, go slowly, etc., etc. I like this choice. I'm glad that we made this choice. You might have made a different one. You may have different stash than I do. All right, what do you think about that? I don't think it makes much difference which direction we broaden at. Kind of like it. And these are, I was just looking to see if these are wider than some of the others we've done, and they aren't really. It's just the curve. Parts of them are wider. What do you think? I think that's what I'm going to go with. So I'll go ahead and cut this, stitch this side, and then we'll, wow, look at this block. Isn't that going to be fun to square up? If in fact we want to square it up. We may leave it wonky, but won't this be fun? Yeah, because we've been doing this routine. If we were to do it like this, it would be less wonky, but then would it be as much fun? All right, want to make sure I leave enough room for a seam that I need to put in there. And do I want this to pretend to match up, or do I want it pretty far off? Okay, we're gonna have to trim this anyway, so I can drop down here. So it doesn't look like I tried to get that to match up and missed, because I'm not going to be able to match it up. So let's do this, and this is going to have to be trimmed anyway, so it's going to be a smaller block than it started out as. All right, I will do this and we'll be back and see if we want to trim this up somehow. There's an added challenge to doing the curves when you have these pieces spliced in, because those are seams that can pull as well as the bias. So there's some interesting things going on. Sprayed it with some flatter, pressed it. It's okay, but it is kind of distorted. Now we have to decide how we want to trim this. Honestly, I didn't plan it, but I kind of like that curved side. Shall we do this? Do we want it to be equilateral? Or how do we want to do this? You know, let's just make it with 90-degree angles at all the corners, but still try to get as much as we can out of this. We have to recut that first side a little bit. Oh, kind of love this going up there though. Look at all we're gonna lose. All right, changed my mind. I'm going to do this for now. We aren't all about straight squares, are we? Or rectangles, I should say. Huh. I like it. And I still have the option, of course, to cut that to make a square, but a rectangle. Sorry. All right. I rather like this shape because then it accents this broader piece up here. When that goes into a quilt, I don't know how it will be, but I can always trim it. So if we were to trim it to be a rectangle, it would look like that, which isn't horrible. But I kind of like that up swoop. I'd almost like a curve there. All right. So that's a curved one, and I like that one very much. It may be my favorite so far, even if it isn't bright. But I'm glad I made the decision to drop this down so that these don't even come close to meeting there. And I like having this swoop. And I think the solid color makes that swoop more pronounced. Well, it is actually more pronounced here. This one isn't as wide. We cut off some of the widest part of that. So I'm liking that. Let me know what you think. Would you have used different fabrics? Done an even curve there or a C curve instead of an S curve? Let me know what you think. So there's one. And then there's another one I want to do, which may be a little crazy, but it is kind of me. It may not be you. I apologize if it's too far off, but I'm going back to a straight cut, and I plan to put a bright in here. Surprise, surprise. And then I have a plan for another piece, and this will be a print, and I want a pretty colorful print, so that's a possibility. Or maybe something like that. Decisions. And I like the linear sort of nature of both of these. I think I have to think about how wide I want it. Do I want this one or the other one? I'm terrible. Indecisive. Let's go with let's go with this one. All right. I'm going to do this one, and I want it to finish it about like that. Doesn't really have to be straight. We could make it go off wackadoodle again. So I'm just going to insert this strip. I'll cut the strip, insert it, and be back. And that piece is all squared up, rectangled up, whatever. And ready for my next step, which will be solids in these colors. I think there may be a second option, we'll see, but I want to pull some of these colors, and then I'm going to cut some surprise circles. Honestly don't know how this is going to go, but it looks good in my head. Here are the colors I've chosen. Oh, I'll bet I can find a yellow too. I will pull one of those too. And I'm going to cut some circles. And I think I'm going to cut them various sizes instead of just one. And I'm going to cut them. If I were going to do circles, I would probably do hand applique for them, but I'm going to cut them as if I was going to applique them. Maybe I will do that. Yes, I will put them on fusible web, and then we can just fuse them, applique them one way or another. I have circles of various colors. They're all solids except this one teeny tiny polka dot. And that's okay. I've done solids because, again, I want to have something that gives the eye some rest but still keeps it moving around. And you've probably guessed what I want to do, which is to, bearing in mind my seam allowances here. This one I think I really want on here. It's a lighter color, so it really needs something. And I think I want to go from larger to smaller. Maybe too many large ones. And I may want to mix them so they aren't actually large in one place and smaller in the other. Get that yellow one in here for some brightness. I can swoop these, as it were. Oh, I like that. I think I rather like that. Gives it a little more movement still. This is the finished product with the circles fused to it. And at this point, I have some decisions to make about how I'm going to stitch these down. I can do a decorative stitch around here, of course. I could use just a zigzag. I could use black thread or white thread. I could use invisible thread, a thread that matches the circle, or one that contrasts, depending on how much I want to highlight that particular piece. So if I used, say, black thread, this would move more toward the background, because that black thread would sort of blend in to my background fabric. If I did it in this color, it would appear much like it does now, just with some added texture around it. If I used contrasting colors, say a lighter pink, then that would move forward more and your eye would be more drawn to it. So you've got all those decisions to make going all the way up. You could also, of course, hand embroider it. You've got lots of different choices. And you could also, you don't have to use circles. You could use different shapes, like triangles that aren't necessarily the same shape, just sort of wonky triangles that are scattered across, either going relatively straight or doing a swoop like this. And it could be, I don't know, any other shape that you wanted to. You could do random shapes that just slide up there. You could put a very narrow strip under here and then put these on top. You could also put one on top of these. I'm not sure that would be my choice, but it might be something you want to take a look at. Maybe a black and white stripe or something would be kind of interesting under there. But I like this one quite a lot. And the next one I want to go to is the white one that we had before, and I will show you a picture of here. At this point, I just backed up on my on my filming and the record button. So I'll put a picture in here. And what I would like to do is use some of these threads to stitch X's that are kind of offset from the pieces that are stitched in there, the X that is pieced in there. And I think that will add not only some more texture to it, but it will add a little something to it that we all know has been lacking. What I want to start out with is that seafoam color. And then I think I will add in some yellow. The purple is a possibility if I want to try to tie it into the other blocks, but I'm not at all sure that they'd end up going into the same quilt as the others. The others can kind of, work together, but this one not so much. I could begin to tie it in if I started using that purple. That pink is just completely off. That's more of a kind of, it's a peachy pink, and I just did colors by memory, and instead of taking a block down with me, which would be sensible, but I have really terrible color memory. So I'm going to mark it with this air and water erasable pen. Since I'm on white, I can't use a white marker, which is what I typically would use, a white chalk marker. But that will enable me to sew straight, which I'm not always very good at once I do embroidery stitches. Of course, they don't have to be straight. They could be curved around, as we did with the swoopies today. That would be an option. Using different color threads would be an option. Different stitches would also be an option. So let me show you what I ended up with. And I'll zoom in a little bit here. I used my favorite railroad stitch, and I just used these 2 different colors of thread, which I think adds some nice oomph to the block and makes it less meh. Now, part of the mehness of it was that it was not as colorful, shall we say, as some of these, and we didn't have extra things going on. It was just straight put an X in the middle of it. But there's something to be said for this. I can see doing a quilt with things like this in these more muted tones rather than the really bright ones that I typically use. I think this could be a really nice one too, and especially if you like doing embroidery stitches, either hand or by machine, I think this would be a good option. So I stitched all of these, and on the first one, I was so lucky. Can you see that intersection there where those match up perfectly? I was not so very lucky in all of them, but it was very heartening that that happened on my first one. And then I sort of, not really randomly, but I spaced them out a little bit, but had them overlap both these strips and each other. And I like that. I also did, just to see how it would work, I did a stitch in a matching thread down the center of the seafoam to add a little texture and just see how it looked. And I like that. It's quite nice. I used the same railroad stitch. You could use multiple stitches if you wanted, or completely different stitches, of course. You could also couch some yarn or some specialty thread under there if you wanted a little more dimension and texture to it. So lots of options for this, which I like the embroidery idea. Watch your eyes, I'm zooming out. All right, these are the 3 that we did today, and I like them all for different reasons, and they are each their own thing. I love the swoop in this and the broadening as it moves up and down here in this case. I love the colors of this, and of course I always like circles, so I like the swoop here as well, and the widening of the spliced strip in there. And then this one, I like stitches as embellishments on some things. I don't know that it would be appropriate, say, on this, except going around the circles here. But I really do like it here as an accent and a little treat for the eye for this block. So that means, zooming out again, we have 5 blocks, different blocks that we've done in the last 2 weeks. And these 2 would go together pretty well. I think this one would go together well. This one not so much, and probably, well, that one a little more actually, but maybe not so much because this is such a light background and these are all dark. I don't really think these much go together either, possibly, but not necessarily. So these are the fruits of our labor for the last couple of weeks. Your comments, of course, I would love to hear. I'll just put those in the comments below. That's going to be it for this week. Next week, we'll start working on the hugs, and I hope you will join me then. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. So I hope to see you next week. In the meantime, be well, be safe, be happy, be quilting. Peace out. I forgot our little fellow. We've actually done 6 blocks in the last 2 weeks. Now, peace out.